So today I'm going to be talking with you about shading, and I know that many people have been anticipating this for a while now, getting excited about shading. So in this draw along, we are going to draw a sphere, and it's going to be a white sphere, and the purpose of this will be to try to understand how we can shade and also how we can understand light. So in this case scenario, we're going to say the light is coming from this side. So you can see here, I've just kind of rounded out my sphere. Right now it's a circle. And so what I'm going to do to make this the most compelling study that I can is to go ahead and just frame in my sphere right now. And so you can see right away I've oriented it a little bit more to the left-hand side. Those of you who watched the video last week and were discerning were like, wow, she's really confused about her left and her right. I totally am. I only passed my driving test with like my hands on the wheel going like this, where I was like, oh yes, that's the left one. Sometimes that's a thing for us. So you'll see that not only that, but I just put in a line here to indicate between the background and the ground that the sphere is on. So my first job, you would think, would be to start shading the sphere, thinking that the light is coming from this side, but that's actually not my first job. My first job is to go ahead and just very softly lay in a background value. So I want you to please do this with me. You're drawing along while we're doing this. And one of the things that I'm going to talk about today is like layering up our shading. And that's in the slideshow as well. And so what you can do is you can come in and just very softly, I'm holding my pencil totally to the side because I don't ever want the point of my pencil touching the paper. I want to get that nice, smooth, kind of wide side. And not only that, I'm going to want to rotate a little bit my pencil as I draw. There are some people who are really, really good at this, and when you get good at it, you really don't have to sharpen your pencil as often because you're using your lead equally from all sides. I'm not really that good. I tend to forget a little bit as I go, so I just keep my pencil sharpener handy. Now, one of the things that I hope that you're starting to see right away, and now I'm going to change the direction of my shading, but one of the things I hope you can see right away is that all of a sudden, everywhere that we've shaded behind the sphere, we are starting to have some better idea that the sphere is white and that the sphere is in an actual spacious environment. Okay, so next up, if that's our background, and I'm just gonna go one more time over the background. And then down here, I'm also gonna put a coat onto this surface. So literally, if you did nothing else, just this process of putting a background and a ground into your drawing really establishes the object. And we don't need to have line. Instead, these objects or spaces are defined by juxtaposed values: dark, medium, light. But let's go ahead, and we're supposing that the light is coming from this side, and so probably the light is going to fall mostly on this part of the sphere, right? Maybe that's going to curve up a little bit more. And then the shadow would probably come out on this side. So I'm rounding out that shadow. So the first thing that I can go ahead and do is say to myself, if the light is coming here, I want to preserve my highlight. So I'm going to go ahead and just do that super lightly, and no shading is going to happen in that area whatsoever. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to start putting in some of my shadow, just so that I can have better definition and I can see the sphere in the space. Now, shadows are really interesting because of the fact that, I mean, light is a complicated thing. So as shadows go out through the space, they often become a little bit more diffused because of reflected light that is bouncing back up and in. There are two kinds of shadows. There's form shadow, right, which is going to happen on this side of the sphere. And then there's cast shadow, the shadow that's actually generated by the sphere. So this area where the shadow is being formed and there's complete kind of occlusion happening, right? The sphere is touching the table, and so it's totally blocking the light there. We can be quite a bit darker there. That's in fact going to really be like our darkest part of the shadow. But because I want my shading to have a strong relationship throughout, I'm not going to do much more before I go into my sphere. And so here, I think it's really helpful if we try to shade with the form in mind. And of course, I don't want anything to be too harsh, right? We've got to have a little bit of shading there. Interestingly, it's going to be this shadow here at the sort of center part of the form that is going to be the darkest, because the rest of this is going to catch just a little bit of cast light, or reflected light, sorry. So one of the things that always got me about reflected light in the past was I was like, holy smokes, like it seemed so beautiful as soon as I could see it, and it really stood out to me. But then I realized that the reflected light always has to be really subdued compared with this area of light. So we're just going to put just a teeny bit of shadow in the light, just like we have a little bit of light back here in the darkness, to help create a real sense of depth there. So then, this is why value is relative. We can start to see, okay, like it would actually be all right to come in and make the shadow probably quite a bit darker down here. And you can see I'm hopping around a little bit. I don't do any section all at once because I think it all has to be in relationship to each other. And you can see I'm turning my pencil. I don't want to shade too much in any one direction. Instead, I want to layer up the graphite. And I don't want to lay my graphite on in a way where I'm pressing too hard. Instead, I want to layer it up. So what I can do to make that area seem more genuinely in shadow is go through kind of like that. And that will enhance that a little bit. Okay, but it still feels like we need a little bit more darkness in here. So now you can start to really see it there, and we're going to go ahead and we're just going to take out this marker indicating where the highlight was supposed to be. We know where it is. And another thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in and add just a little bit more shading around the sphere. Just one more dose of that darkness in the background, but I'm going to take it right up to the edge. So an important thing to know about when you're developing your values is that your eraser is not for mistakes, it's for letting light back into your composition. So what I can do is just sort of go through here and maybe let just a little bit of that light back in. And out here, this is bugging me, see, because it's still defined a little bit by line. And out at the very edge of the shadow, that's where we want our shadow to become absolutely the softest. I see a lot of people do really hard shadows, and sometimes, like with a really specific light source, that's what's happening. But most of the time, it's probably not. Okay, so there more or less we've got a sphere that we've shaded, and we have a light source, we have a shadow, we've got our highlight, we've got our area of light, we've got the darkest area here, we've got a little reflected light coming up inside of the form shadow. This is the cast shadow. If I want this to be smooth, I can take my blender and just touch right over that background, and you can see it really kind of pushes down the graphite into the paper. Some people really do not appreciate the effect of the blender because of the fact that they feel like it kills the texture and the light coming through the paper. I'm not so particular. I think if you want rough, you don't blend, and if you want smooth, you blend, and either one is okay. Both of them are beautiful, actually. Okay, but you can see there's really like a kind of profound darkening effect when I do that. And so here, the upper part of this sphere is not defined by a line, it's just defined by the value juxtaposition. And come down here and give this just a little wash. Maybe we want to darken in our shadow. Right, and after a little while this is going to get quite saturated, and then it becomes where you can sort of blend just with this, because of the fact that you don't even have to put graphite onto your paper first, because this is already dark. And then I can push that shadow out just a little bit more. So I really loved the textures in there, but this is becoming a lot more smooth. I'm also realizing that because I've done this, I'm probably going to do a little bit more erasing work to let the light back into the sphere. Maybe something like that. Okay, happy drawing. So there were two things I noticed as soon as I turned off the camera. One was that I needed to clean up this bottom part just a little bit more. I had that a little bit too dark, I felt. And so please, like, if you need to make corrections, just make them. Never give yourself a hard time about it. And then I'm just not so sure about this area here. It's like I was sort of afraid to just let the contrast happen. So let's just try that a little bit more. So it's completely normal that there would be some areas of the sphere that would just sort of fade into the shadow. And maybe we can do that mark once more where we're connecting through the shadow. And that really seems to give a convincing kind of space. So just going in and really making sure you have that occlusion developed right where the object is meeting the surface. And then you're going to get absolutely one of the darkest darks probably in the whole composition where the object meets the surface. But you don't want that to be too stark, right? You have to blend that